For more on the ultimate goals of this war and the long-term future of Iran, I want to bring in Miloud Chennoufi. He's an associate professor at the Royal Military College of Canada, and he's joining us from Toronto. Miloud, appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We've heard shifting rationale from the U.S. as its reasons for entering this war. What do you make of the inconsistent messaging that we've been hearing from Donald Trump, from U.S. top officials?
The first thing to say here is that the confusion about the objectives and the ends of the war on the American side shows very clearly that the real objective was set by Israel because the Prime Minister Netanyahu wanted this war for a long time. It has been over a decade now that he has been trying to convince American presidents to go to war against Iran. And Donald Trump is not well known for being a trigger-happy, resisted this pressure until last year in June. And even at that time, the war was very limited. This time around, Prime Minister Netanyahu found a way to convince him, to pressure him to go to war. And that's why basically there is this confusion. On the Israeli side, the objective is very clear, and it is regime change in Iran. Certainly not to build a democracy, because a democracy will be opposed to any hegemonic enterprise from Israel and the United States, but to have fragile states with very weak institutions, similar to what we've witnessed in Iraq, Syria, Libya. And this is basically a strategic objective for Israel in order to be able to continue the colonization of Palestinian territory. That's the plan. On the American side, there is a huge difficulty in justifying the war itself from a legal perspective, and that's why a lot of experts today believe that this is an illegal war from the international law perspective, since it was not authorized by the Security Council on the one hand, but it's also an illegal war from the perspective of American law, since President Trump did not get a mandate from Congress to go to war.
All right. Just to bring this to a Canadian perspective, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has been pretty clear in his support for the U.S. and Israel war, initially at least. I just want to play a clip of what he had to say yesterday, speaking to reporters, and get your reaction.
To prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace and security. Because Canada is taking the world as it is, not passively waiting for a world we wish to be. We do, however, take this position with regret because the current conflict is another example of the failure of the international order.
What do you make of Carney's reasoning?
Well, when it comes to threats, nuclear threats, even the Americans said last year that they destroyed everything nuclear in Iran. This is point number one. Second, when the war started, negotiations were taking place. And the mediator, as one of your correspondents said, the mediator clearly stated that Iran was negotiating in good faith, and they were ready to make serious concessions on enriched uranium. So on this perspective, clearly there is no argument for the war. Now, for the threat against international peace, it's a very curious argument, because the two states who are waging war against Iran has threatened international peace. The United States in the past through, for example, the invasion of Iraq, the illegal interventions elsewhere, and of course, Israel. Here we are talking about a state who has two heavy files in international justice institutions, one for genocide at the International Court of Justice and one for war crimes at the International Criminal Court. So it's very difficult to accept these arguments as being sound. Therefore, I think that this position taken by the Canadian Prime Minister is in contradiction, on one hand, with Davos, the speech at Davos, but also in contradiction with what Canada observed when the Americans invaded Iraq and refused to join because Canada's conviction at the time was that it was an illegal intervention. Now, we might ask ourselves why the same party will have a different position in two similar situations. And the answer is very simple. Canada, as a middle power, never goes alone in international relations, so they need to be part of a club. And if you remember, during the Iraq War or the run-up to the invasion of Iraq, there were other like-minded states like France, like Germany, who opposed the intervention or the invasion without the Security Council clearance. But today, the same states are supporting the war, and that's what explains the fact that, the room for maneuver for the Canadian Prime Minister was very, very narrow, hence his position. But from a legal perspective, it has absolutely no basis.
Miloud, I only have time for one more question. I might ask a kind of two-part. There are reports the son of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei could be chosen as the next supreme leader. What do you think? Do you think that that is likely? And then, I've had a lot of young Iranian Canadians speak to me in the last few days about how hopeful they are for a secular democracy being the result of this in this moment. Your thoughts on both?
Very quickly. So regarding the first point, it's very, very difficult to tell. Now, what we know about the institutional arrangements in Iran is that the new guide, the new religious guide, has to have enough seniority in the Shia clergy. I'm not sure Khamenei's son is at that level of at that level of seniority. This is for point number one. For the point number two, it's very understandable for anybody to want democracy and freedom for Iran and elsewhere, including in the United States and Israel, where in both countries there is serious regression of democratic liberties and freedoms. But we have to be realistic about this. Human history has shown us that successful democratization, like what happened in Spain, Portugal, Greece, Taiwan, South Korea, South Africa, and elsewhere in Latin America, never took place through airstrikes and devastating wars. It has to be the outcome of an indigenous movement. And this indigenous movement basically is hurdled by this kind of wars. Add to that the fact that I doubt that the objectives of the United States and Israel is to have a democracy in Iran, because democracy means the will of people, and the will of people in Iran is very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, knowing that, making sure that this cause is not defended in the region is the main objective of Israel and, of course, of the United States. So the chances for a democracy in Iran, thanks to this war, are close to non-existent.
Miloud, very interesting to get your insight. Thank you. Miloud Chennoufi is an associate professor at the Royal Military College of Canada.